we have this working example where we use callbacks in order to have the data fetched before we call the handleData function. The parameters that we pass to the fetchData function depend on how we handle the data afterwards. If changes are made to the handleData function, then the callback parameters of fetchData have to adjust accordingly. We will now change the fetchData function and set it to return a promise so that it is independent from the upcoming functions. It will not depend on the callbacks related to the functions that happen after the data is fetched. So I will remove CB and CB2 and then return a promise. Set the promise resolver function. Move the set timeout in the body of the resolver function, which will have a fulfill function as a parameter, and we will be calling this fulfill function. Now let's call fetchData with the array argument and see what we get. We get an error because we have to remove this as well. This reference to CB2. Call it again. Nothing is happening. If we log this call to fetchData and then run again, we can see that we have a pending promise. In order to access the data now, we have to use the then function. It is available inside the then clause. So we call fetchData, pass the array, and then call another function which will have the result of the promise. I will call it res and use it with the handleData function. So then we will call the handleData, which takes a data parameter and a callback. The data is this result, and the callback we will use will be the logTheDouble method. And now let's see how it works. So we get the fetching data log, then the handling data log, then we iterate through the elements of the array and log the doubles. This is the refactoring of the fetchData function in order to return a promise and have it independent of the upcoming usage of the data. It just takes the data parameter, and if the promise is fulfilled, we get this data as a result. We can also see the improvements in the expanded example, where an additional asynchronous function, the reverseData function, is added to the chain, and along with the function called chainExpanding, the callback parameters dependencies are also expanding. The use of promises helps us overcome this problem. The new versions of fetchData and reverseData are self-contained and independent from how handleData or any following function operate. Any change on data handling after the data is fetched and reversed does not affect the fetchData and reverseData functions anymore. And this is how we can call it with then clauses and the use of arrow functions. Let's see this in action. FetchData was called, reversed, and then handled, and we got the reverseData doubles. And after we get used to this syntax reading, it is read in a logical manner. We fetch the data, then we get a result, and then use the reverseData function with this result, and then the next result that comes from the reverseData function gets handled by handleData, which takes its own callback. This was about replacing callback-based code with promise-based code and the benefits we get if we do so.